I'm Lisa Brownlee from Leaders Imago, and for those of you who are getting to watch this, I have my dear friend and colleague, Ron Harvey, with me today. And Ron and his wife, Linda, founded Global Core Strategies and Consulting, which is their business. He functions as their chief operating officer, working for his wife. Way to go, feminist there.
Yes.
Their focus is really on leadership development, executive leadership, leadership at all levels. They do a lot of coaching, a lot of organizational development work, really centered around cultural and behavioral change, all the things that I am passionate about too. So Ron and I have quite a bit in common. And over the last several years that I've known Ron, Ron has taught me so many things. And because this month is Rise to the Challenge month at Leaders Imago, and we're talking about changing our own individual mindsets, changing our thinking, changing our paradigms, but also looking at, challenging those things, but also challenging our teams and how they treat one another and how they work together and workflow and innovating from an internal process standpoint, rethinking, challenging some of those paradigms. I couldn't think of a better person to invite here to educate me and those of you who are getting to watch on really how do we challenge our thinking? How do we challenge our personal paradigms whenever we get a particular viewpoint that we get stuck on? And so, Ron, thank you
Yes,
for
yes.
coming and being part of this conversation today. And I just kind of want to hand it over to you and ask, when is a time that you have changed your thinking on something that was significant?
Yeah. First, I'd like to pause briefly and just acknowledge of the work that you're doing and what you're doing in the community and the relationship that we have. And wanting to have these conversations, I think there's no better time than now to start having these conversations, if you rise to the challenge. Because I think right now, as a society, we all are challenged with carrying things that we were taught or that we have been exposed to that not necessarily are as accurate as what we've been taught to believe,
Yeah.
or not even as useful or relevant anymore. And so I think we all have to rise to the challenge and challenge our thinking. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. And I hope that I rise to the challenge of what you want from me today, and I can meet your expectations. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I love talking about this stuff, even when it's uncomfortable, because I think it's important. I think people always matter, and if we can just get to the place of understanding that we're all human, and there's a way that we can do things better for each other. And so I truly believe that everything that will happen because of leaders like you and I that show up and willing to do the heavy lifting and challenge even what we think. I always use a phrase is, does your audio match your video? Are you willing to take the risk to address the things that you have to address, even when it means you lose something? And I think all of us are in a place now where all of us are going to have to lose something, whether it's friends, whether it's some of our close family, whether it's some position or title or image that people thought to make this better for everybody in our country. All of us are going to have to give up something. Nobody's going to walk away with everything that they currently have. And so I think that's important for us. So yeah, thank you for doing it. I mean, sincerely as a friend, it's important. And for us to be here together is important for me as well. But people get to see us having dialogue that 3 years ago we probably wouldn't be able to have, or it wouldn't be received well.
Yeah.
And so thank you for what you do. When you think of, for me, what would I share that thinking? I mean, there are so many scenarios and things that played out in my life. And how do I make those? What did I do? I guess I start off with the first one, working for a national agency, Intel agency out of DC. And I was the diversity and inclusion officer for the organization. 6,000 people in this organization. And I got hired, didn't really know why, except for I knew my resume was nice, but I had no idea about this organization. And they found me, I didn't find them. And I took the position. And I can remember standing in that organization. I got hired for a couple of things. Once, the resume was good, but also I got hired because they needed an African-American male. And so I fit the status, what they were looking for, and it worked out well. And, I got hired, and people thought I would be upset because I got hired because I was a Black man. And I said, no, I'm not disappointed in that. but I want them to know that I'm more than just a black man when I get there. So I wasn't frustrated about why I got hired. But fast forward that to about a year into the organization, LGBTQ was beginning to get more voice and more recognition and become more visible. And they approached me when I was in the organization and asked me to be their keynote speaker. I have a biblical background. All of my ancestors and the men from my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were pastors. So very challenging. And so when the LGBTQ community approached me and asked me to be their speaker, I was stuck. I was literally stuck, and I literally asked them, "Why are you picking me? Why are you asking me? You know, I'm straight." They say, "Yes, we do." And I think a sigh of relief, like, yes, thank you. I'm not sending off any, because for African-American male, that was, for first being black, I guess it's hard. But when you're African-American male back in those days, and if anybody approached us, we were homophobic. African-American men had a hard time with someone thinking we were gay or we weren't gay. It was almost like very, very continuous. It was a lot of friction in that space if someone thought that about us, and we weren't, because it was just another thing that they will hold against you. And so I was like, hey, let me be clear that I'm not. And I said, hey, why are you picking me anyway? They said, well, you've been here for over a year, and in your role, we've never had anyone in your role. And I was the voice for the organization that was fair, that heard us, that respected us, that stood up for us to be treated, just like everyone else would get treated. And at that moment, I said, okay, I'll do it. But before I did, I had to go talk to my dad. And I said, Dad, I want to talk to you about something that I don't think is right. I don't think it's fair. I said, you preach this from the pulpit Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. I said, and I'm at a different place in my life, and I don't think that's fair anymore. And this is the guy who taught me everything about faith that I know. Literally helped me. And I'm challenging his philosophy, his teachings. And I said, the Bible teaches us to love thy neighbor, and you don't get to choose them. Which means they don't come like you want them to come so they can be easy to love. Some of them come very complicated. And you don't get to choose your neighbor. It just says love thy neighbor. Mm-hmm. I say, and Dad, you can't preach that anymore. I'm going to ask you not to. And he didn't. He never did anymore. He thanked me for having a conversation. And me at that time, even no matter how old you get in the African American culture, you just don't like challenge your dad on stuff like that, because no matter how old you get, you're still his child. So they remind you of that quick, but he didn't. He literally listened, and he learned and began to shift, the way our family was structured and what it looked like, and the conversations that we're having at the dinner table and what we did in our communities. It began to change the dynamics. I'm the last of 12 children. And so being the last, so the baby of the family, addressing the head of the family is a lot of kids before me that probably should have did that before me. And so it changed my whole mindset about what equal really meant. It changed my whole mindset about what are we holding on to that's not, it wasn't right then, but now that you know it, are you going to do something different? And it is not healthy anymore. And so I spoke over 5,000 people and shared with them that, at that point where I had traveled, and that was a part of my keynote speech, is how I had to understand and respect people, and I don't have to co-sign on everything. And they respected me for that. And so it shifted my mindset completely, not only just in dealing with someone's sexual orientation, but also someone's education or lack of, on what they're driving or not driving, their position or their title, the color of their skin, if they talk different or walk different or believe different. If someone was just different, it made me more curious of just understanding them. And before, I was more judgmental.
Well, that is a significant change in mindset.
Yeah.
And to be brave and have the conversation with your dad
yes.
Is
or crazy.
Talk about rise to the challenge.
Yes.
But so can you tell me more, like, what was happening inside of you that helped you move from one position on LGBTQ to the opposite position? Like, how did you approach that thought?
Yeah, really solid question. In that organization, you begin to notice as you begin to define who you are. And what helped me move from there is I said, well, who are you? Not who someone says you are, not what the position or the title. Who are you? I mean, who do you think ought to be able to be treated a certain way or not treated a certain way? So I started defining who I was and what was valuable to me and what I wanted the organization to look like. And it had nothing to do with my job description or the position or the title. I literally had to define me and what was important to me versus what was handed down to me. And I think oftentimes we go off of what's handed down to us and we don't pause to define who we are. And so I had to define who I was at that moment. And that's what made me go talk to my dad before I moved forward with it, because I wanted to be able to feel strong enough and enough courage to define who I was to my own father before I go and define it to 5,000 people. And so that was a gap for me, as I had to make that my first step in having a conversation with someone that was significant to me and allow them to hear me, because it was also a sounding board for me that, hey, you're going in the right direction.
Mm.
And so it gave me more confidence and gave me more ability to stand solid on what I truly believed in. And so I think at that moment in that organization, there were a lot of things that happened that I've always seen and fought for and decided I was going. But this was the one opportunity to say, hey, are you going to do the right thing even when you have everything that's at risk?
Yeah.
And I had to challenge every executive in our organization around this issue, and it worked out well.
Wow. What if your dad hadn't been so supportive of your change in viewpoint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have still done it. I think it would have been more mental for me, but externally, I would have compartmentalized that so I can still do it. I would have still done it. But I think the thing of being the last kid, you know, they allowed me as a kid to grow up and to challenge what I saw. They actually taught me to challenge what I saw. I mean, so even when it comes to race in my family, grew up in an all black community, and all my older brothers, there were 8 of us, and my brothers couldn't date a white girl, just wasn't acceptable. And I challenged my mom on it because I didn't understand it. And my mom told me, she said, it has nothing, it doesn't have as much to do with racism as you may think it does, son. She said it has everything to do with safety. And
Mm,
that meant a lot to me
wow.
because I looked at it as racism. And she said, yeah, racism, but society's not ready to see a black boy walk down the street with a white girl. And I don't want to bury one of my boys because someone couldn't accept them as being black and dating a white girl.
Wow.
So I can't allow you to date because society will hurt you if not kill you. And that was real. And I said, Mom, I get it. I can tell you today that 2 of my brothers are married to white women. So it's changed. It's gotten better, and my mom accepts them just like she would have accepted them then. And so when she helped me understand, it was about safety. I'm sure she's been mistreated, but she's very forgiving. I mean, but she was more concerned about us as, African American boys, black boys growing up, that we may not be as cool headed about it as she would have been, and we would have gotten in trouble as soon as the cop would have stopped us or said something to us. I think we would have responded from emotions and, hey, equal rights, and we get to say this and we get to say all that. And she's right. We probably would have responded that way, and she would have been at a funeral.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just wrapping my head around that, around your
Yeah.
experience. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
You're
Um,
welcome.
well, I'm thinking about, what triggered you externally to even change your mind? So you were approached by this group to
Yes.
create this opportunity for people to learn a different perspective.
Yes.
And then it sounds like there was a lot of personal values clarification. Who am
Yes.
I? What am I about? And how does that lend itself to this conversation, this thing I'm being asked to do? And where am I right now? And where do I need to
Yes.
be? How does this all fit together? So in that case, rising to the challenge of um, having to reorder your values, perhaps.
Yes.
And
Yes.
those, gosh, talk about core internal and all of the baggage that goes into growing up in those experiences and what is ingrained in us from the culture that we are just steeped in,
Yeah.
and clarifying values in order to move in a different direction.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, and as you're asking the question and reflecting on where did it begin, where does that start at? And I would say it started, as I'm reflecting now, it started really young, in ninth grade, actually, in high school. And in ninth grade in our school, a lot of our African American kids, whether male or female, our females were coming up pregnant at an early age. My boys were getting in trouble and smoking weed or doing drugs or hanging out and all the stuff the boys, were doing. But I just saw this disruption of our black teenagers. In ninth grade, I picked up on this. I mean, and so I was really young. Most people are like, in ninth grade, you were thinking about stuff like that? I said, yeah, in ninth grade, I was watching this. And so as I watched this in ninth grade, I had an opportunity to be a speaker. And I picked the topic of talking to our young teenagers about drugs, violence, pregnancy, dropping out of school, getting an education. And so in ninth grade, I started having this conversation, and it just went over so well that I actually in ninth grade started becoming a public speaker without recognizing that's what I was doing, or I was becoming an advocate without knowing I was becoming an advocate. And I literally went from school to school. It became almost like a subject for me, where they took me from school to school, and
Wow.
asked me, my parents, can I travel to talk to the kids, because our adults couldn't reach them. And so I started really, I had a platform of speaking against things that were destroying our community. And and I would say that I'm sure I saved a lot of children
Mhm.
in ninth grade and worked my way through and stayed in speaking the entire time in high school. But literally, that's probably where it started at. It's just, how do I make a difference? How do I change something? How do I give people something and understand their pain that's associated with it, but help them know that it doesn't have to be this way? And I think that's really where it started at for me, is just recognizing it didn't have. I got tired of seeing our black kids not graduate. I got tired of seeing them getting arrested. I got tired of seeing them, smoke weed. And I'm from Florida, you know, Palm Beach County, and every one of my friends, except for probably two, smoke weed. And people are like, wow, how did you survive never ever doing drugs? I said, I just never had an interest. So every black person doesn't do drugs. But I was fundamentally sound at that time. And they hung around me and they see me, Lisa. They were like, hey, no, don't pick up Ron because he doesn't. And they literally would put me out the car and tell me don't hang out with them. They looked out for me. They made sure that I would stay true to who I was. So I had some people that took care of me. And so those things stand out now. If I go back home, they're like, no, he's straight. He's good. But I don't know where it came from other than I started doing it in ninth grade.
Wow. Well, I mean, talk about how that has just created a foundation for the work that you do now, the amazing work
Yes.
that you're doing now. Well,
Yes.
so, as far as impact of
Yes.
that experience, changing your mindset about, in particular, LGBTQ,
Yes.
um, what what impact has that had on you, on others? Shifting your mindset on that
Yeah.
topic.
I think it allows me to stay grounded, but it allows me to stay authentic. I always say that I don't have to agree. I don't have to co-sign for people and who they are, but I don't have to disrespect who they are. And I live by that model. There are a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to lifestyles for people, but I don't have to. And it's allowed me to stay real, and people will come around and gravitate towards me because they're like, no, you can actually be yourself, whoever that is around Ron, as long as you have ethics and morals and values. I don't have to endorse your lifestyle, and so I'm okay with that. I figured out that it's helped me to, in my family, under center of gravity. You figure 12 kids is not always uh, nice around the house because everybody's an adult now. But I'm the one center of gravity when I come around, that my family settles down and have real conversations. You find out the rooms I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina. People appreciate it because it's going to be diverse, it's going to be inclusive, and you get to be who you are, and you're going to be appreciated and not tolerated. So I'm disappointed when people don't show up versus worrying about if it's a room full of African Americans or a room full of Caucasians or a room full of men. I immediately pick up on the things that's missing. And so it's allowed me to really make this community this thing of really community. So I believe in unity in our community. So it's allowed me to grow into this thing of, all of the kids know, all of my family knows that, no, if you come around Ron, he values everybody.
Hmm.
He may not agree with everybody, but he's never going to really, judge him. And people say, how do you get to this place of non-judgmental? I say, I realize what I don't like and how it felt. And I've been in situations where it's happened in every community, so even in the black community, I'm a light skinned guy with green eyes. So even in the black community, there were challenges for me like, hey, are you black or are you white? I say I'm both.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. And so when you start looking at stuff like that, it allowed me to sit at a table to have real conversations that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the way you approach every person that comes your way with respect
Yes.
and um, and empathy.
Yeah.
And when I think about my interactions with you, um, you have always been very empathetic and respectful and created a space where I could be me.
Yes. Yeah.
And gosh, the impact of being able to be yourself goes on and on and on. And there are ripples there when you're empowering someone to be themselves.
Yeah.
And for those who are in the LGBTQ community, you've brought helped create a space at the table for conversation through your change in your thinking on that topic, on that issue.
Yeah, I mean, which is huge for us. I mean, and people want to go out and worry about policy or procedure or law or how someone's born. I say, well, when you get past all of this, still a human being. And so what do you want to think someone becomes that way when they're born, or what do you think they became that way out? That's irrelevant to me. I mean, I just don't get caught up in that because there's nothing, can I just respect them for who they are? And can I appreciate them for who they are? And not come across, because there's a difference for me in my mind, Lisa, of tolerate and appreciate. I think when you lay on the side of policy and procedure and law, you begin to tolerate people because the law says you has to. But when you appreciate people, you don't need a law. You don't need a policy. You don't need someone to tell you how to do it. You're doing it because it's coming from internal. And when you're tolerating people, it's coming from these external things. And
Wow,
so when I begin to talk about appreciating people, I'm coming from an internal piece, and I don't need a law to govern that.
that's quite a distinction that you're making. I like how you said that. Appreciation versus toleration.
Yes.
Um, wow. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You, again, like every time I talk with you, my mind is expanded, and you challenge me to be a better person, and I thank you for that challenge.
Yes, and I think we do it to each other. I've watched you from the time we've met and we've known each other for years, and I just watch how organized you were and how engaging you were and super smart, always smiling, down to earth. I've never felt uncomfortable in any space with you, and when you see us, there's no distinction between the two of us, and we're out. They know there's a black guy and a white girl sitting down, and there's never been a level of uncomfort, regardless of what everybody else is happening. And so that for me is very valuable. And I tell people those are moments that I strive for. Is how do I give something to you that you can't do for yourself, and how do you give me something that I can't do for myself?
Mm,
And so you've always been an advocate. You've always been super kind. You've always been promoting. You've always been there. And there are some rooms I think you've done things that you don't recognize that you do,
hmm.
because that's super valuable. And so how do you give me what I can't do for myself? And you've done that.
Well, I'm thankful for mutual appreciation,
Yes,
Ron.
yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you for your
welcome. Thank
time.
you.